Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching this. Today, I will be giving you my presentation or presenting the tabletop exercise for Columbus Airport or KCSG. I will be speaking from the perspective of the airport director, meaning throughout this scenario, I am acting as the incident commander responsible for the overall response. I made sure that this exercise is designated in accordance with 14 CFR Part 139 requirements and incorporates the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System as well. The purpose of this exercise is to evaluate how effectively the airport can respond to a realistic aircraft emergency involving multiple cascading events as required, and while also coordinating internal personnel, external agencies, and ensuring the safety and care of passengers and their families as well. The objectives of this exercise are centered around operational effectiveness and leadership. We are evaluating this exercise of how well we establish and maintain incident command using ICS principles that includes not only identifying who is in charge, but also where command is physically located and how it expands into unified command. Second, we are assessing our aircraft rescue and firefighter and response, ensuring compliance with Part 139 standards, particularly response time, agent deployment, and rescue coordination. Third, we are evaluating the activation and use of Emergency Operations Center, including when I make the decision to activate it, where it is located, and how it supports field operations. We are also testing communication systems. This is something I wanted to add on. Both internal radio communications and external communications through media and social platforms, so basically public affairs. And then another major objective is victim and family assistance, including how we establish a family assistance center and ensure compliance with the ADA. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the scenario overview.
The scenario begins with a Delta Connection CRJ 700 regional jet operating a scheduled flight from Hacksville Jackson Atlanta International Airport to Columbus Airport. On board the aircraft are 58 passengers and 4 crew members, for a total of 62 individuals on board the aircraft. Weather conditions at Columbus are deteriorating rapidly. We are experiencing severe thunderstorms, heavy rain, lightning, and reduced visibility, which increases the risk during landing operations. The aircraft will be landing on runway 6, and then during the landing, the aircraft experiences a hydraulic system failure, which significantly reduces braking capability and directional control. As a result, the aircraft veers off the runway and comes to rest in the grassy safety area adjacent to runway 6. Shortly after coming to a stop, smoke is observed from the left coming out from the left engine, and passengers begin evacuating. At this moment, I recognize this as a full-scale aircraft emergency, and I initiate the airport emergency plan. Now, let's talk about the planned cascading events. For our first cascading event, we will be having an engine fire. So, a fuel leak ignites and it causes a fire on the left engine. This immediately increases risk to the passengers, risk to the responders, and an urgency of evacuation. ARF must deploy foam agents, contain the fire spread, and continue rescue operations simultaneously. Pictured here is one of the trucks that Columbus Airport has. They have something similar to this. I couldn't find like an exact picture, but this is something that our ARF team will be used in response to that engine fire. Moving on to the second cascading event. At approximately 20 minutes into the exercise, we will be having a power outage along with misinformation. So, due to the simulated thunderstorm, the terminal experiences a partial power outage and our communication systems are disrupted. Simultaneously, our social media falsely reports fatalities, which causes panic among families, increased media attention, pressure on airport leadership, which all falls under just the misinformation that happens during accidents in the real world. Now, as airport director, I am managing a fire, a mass casualty event, and a communication crisis for the entire exercise. Now that we got that out of the way, I'm going to walk you through the timeline of this exercise. And this is one of the most important parts of the exercise because it shows how quickly a situation escalates and how my decisions evolve in real time. Starting at the far left of the slide, at 0 minutes or approximately 14:30, we have the initial incident. This is when the CRJ 700 arriving from Atlanta experiences hydraulic failure during landing on runway 6 and veers off the runway. At this exact moment, I declare a full aircraft emergency and activate the airport emergency plan. ARF is immediately dispatched, and I begin my initial size up while preparing to establish incident command at the crash site. Moving to the next point. At 15 minutes, we see the first major escalation, a fuel leak resulting in an engine fire. This significantly increases the severity of the incident. At this point, my priority shifts to life safety and rapid fire suppression. ARF is fully engaged, and I ensure that evacuation efforts are continuing while maintaining responder safety. This is also when I begin anticipating the need for additional resources and mutual aid. At 25 minutes, we hit another critical turning point. This is the power loss event. The terminal experiences a partial power outage, which begins to impact communications and operations inside the airport. Around this same time, I have already made the decision to activate the Emergency Operations Center, and now I escalate it toward full activation. The EOC becomes critical here because it helps manage communication breakdowns and coordinate resources while the incident command post stays focused on the crash scene. At 40 minutes, families begin arriving at the airport. This creates a completely different type of challenge, not operational, but emotional and logistical. At this point, I direct the activation of the Family Assistance Center in the family area inside the terminal. We begin coordinating with the airline and the American Red Cross to support families, provide information, and prevent congestion all around the crash site. Then, at 45 minutes, we see the emergence of misinformation. False reports begin circulating on social media claiming fatalities. This introduces a communication crisis on top of the existing emergency going on. At this point, I rely on the public information officer to push accurate information quickly and maintain control of the narrative going on. This step is critical because misinformation can create panic and interfere with operations. Finally, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the index time of 1600, which represents the point where the scenario transitions from immediate response into sustained operations and recovery planning. What this timeline really demonstrates is that within just 45 minutes, we go from a single aircraft incident to a multi-layered emergency involving fire, infrastructure failure, public panic, and family management. As the incident commander, I am consistently reassessing priorities at each stage, starting with life safety, then stabilizing the incident, and finally, managing the broader operational and public impact. This is exactly why structured decision making and ICS is so critical, because without it, the situation would quickly become unmanageable. Now, let's talk about the ICS structure, or the incident command structure. As the airport director, I immediately established incident command because I will be acting as the incident command director. Within minutes, we established a unified command which includes myself as the airport director and the ARF chief, and along with the Columbus and Fire Emergency Medical Services representative, with the Columbus Police Department representative as well. This unified command structure ensures that all responding agencies are coordinated and working toward the same objectives. We organize the ICS sections as follows. In the operations section, it is led by the ARF representative, which would be the fire suppression and rescue team. And then looking at the planning section, we have the airport operations. So this would be situation tracking and projections. Next is the logistics section, which is airport maintenance, which is in charge of equipment, lighting, and support. Finally, we have the finance/admin. This one is part of the airport administration. They handle all the administration paperwork for the airport. This structure allows us to scale efficiently as the incident continues to grow on. We're going to talk about our Emergency Operations Center activation. So, the picture depicted on the slide right now showcases the actual room inside of Columbus Airport where we'll be having our EOC set up. This will be our primary location, and at approximately 10 minutes into the incident, after confirming the number of passengers and the severity of the situation, me as airport director will make the decision to activate the airport emergency operations center, and the EOC will be located in the terminal conference room inside the main terminal inside the airport. Initially, we activate at a partial level, bringing in key personnel to support operations. Around 25 minutes into the exercise, as cascading events develop, I escalate the EOC to full activation. By doing this, the EOC handles resource coordination with our partners, communication with outside agencies, along with situation reporting and strategic decision making. This allows the ICP to focus on tactical response, while the EOC manages the bigger picture of the entire exercise. Then, as a backup, our alternate EOC would be the R station located near the crash site. Moving on to the employee responsibilities during the exercise. For a quick overview before I go deeper into what they're going to be doing, we'll start with ops. The operations team will be making sure that the runway is completely closed off for the exercise. Next, ARF, they're going to be in charge of the fire and rescue efforts. Police, there'll be security there. And TSA will be security integrity for the airport. And then the airlines will just take accountability. Now, diving deeper, for the airport operations, of course, they're going to make sure the runway is closed. They will also issue NOTAMs letting them know about the exercise happening, along with managing the airfield overall. fire suppression, they'll be in charge of rescue, along with any hazard controls that may occur during the exercise. The Columbus Police Department and Sheriff's Office, they'll make sure they'll have perimeter security, they'll be in charge of the traffic, and along with crowd control. For TSA, security integrity, that's just maintaining security inside the terminal. And then for the airlines, this will be Delta connection, since we are simulating a Delta connection crash. They'll be in charge of passenger accountability and just manifest verification. This clarity prevents any confusion and ensures efficiency overall during the exercise. As incident commander, I ensure with all this happening, there will be no duplication of effort and no gaps in responsibility.
Now, I want to shift focus to a critical component of this response that is often overlooked, and that is the role of the volunteers. When you look at the image on this slide, you can see a simulated mass casualty environment. You have multiple victims on the ground, responders actively triaging, and a wide operational footprint. This kind of scene requires far more manpower than what airport personnel alone can provide. As the incident commander at Columbus Airport, I recognized very early in the response that volunteers are essential force multipliers. They allow us to ascend our capabilities without overloading our primary responders. Starting with the first group listed, the American Red Cross. They play a major role in supporting both victims and families. While they are not involved in fire suppression or rescue, they are critical for mass care operations, including sheltering, feeding, and providing emotional support. In this scenario, they are heavily involved in staffing the Family Assistance Center inside the terminal, and where they can help families process information and cope with the situation. Next, we have CERT teams, or Community Emergency Response Teams. These are trained volunteers who can assist with basic disaster response tasks such as light search and rescue, triage support, and logistical assistance. Under ICS, they are assigned specific roles so they are used effectively but safely. They are never placed in hazardous environments but are extremely valuable in supporting operations on the perimeter of the incident. Next, we have airport ambassadors, who are already familiar with the terminal layout and passenger flow. Their role becomes especially important once families and media begin arriving. They help with wayfinding, directing passengers, and reducing confusion inside the terminal. This helps maintain order that allows law enforcement and TSA to focus on security. In addition, we have support from the local community. This involves volunteers who may assist through organized channels such as local emergency groups or coordinated relief efforts. It's important to emphasize that as incident commander, I ensure all volunteers are properly vetted, assigned, and supervised within the ICS structure. We do not allow spontaneous volunteers to self-deploy into the operational area, as that can create major safety risks. Finally, we have support from Fort Benning, the Army base located nearby. They have personnel from Fort Benning that can provide additional manpower, medical support, and logistical resources if requested through proper channels. This adds a significant layer of capability, especially in large-scale incidents. What's important to understand is that volunteers are not just extra hands, they are part of a structured response. Under ICS, they are integrated into operations through staging areas and assigned supervisors. This ensures accountability, safety, and efficiency. As the incident commander, I am constantly balancing the need for additional support with the need to maintain control and organization. When used correctly, volunteers significantly enhance our ability to manage a complex, multi-layered emergency exercise like this one. Without them, our response would be much more slow, less efficient, and more strained on our primary responders. Now I want to address a critical component of this exercise that often doesn't get enough attention, and that is responder mental health. Even though this is a tabletop exercise and not a live incident, we treat this as if it were real, because in an actual aircraft emergency, the psychological impact on responders can be just as significant as the physical hazards. Looking at the slide, there are three key focus areas: monitoring stress, rotating crews, and providing critical incident stress management or CISM support. Starting with monitoring stress. As the incident commander at Columbus Airport, I am not just responsible for operational decisions, but also for the well-being of my personnel. During an accident like this, responders are exposed to injured passengers, high-pressure decision-making, and chaotic events. Even in this exercise, we simulate that by having participants think through stressful conditions in a real-world scenario. This would rely on supervisors and section chiefs to actively observe their teams for signs of stress, fatigue, or emotional overload. Some signs of this include slow decision-making, communication breakdowns, and visible emotional distress. Recognizing these early is critical to maintaining both safety and effectiveness. Moving to the second point, and that is rotating crews. In a prolonged incident, fatigue becomes a major factor. As incident commander, I ensure that crews are not operating continuously in high-stress roles without relief. Through the logistics and operations sections, we coordinate structured crew rotations, allowing responders time to rest, hydrate, and just reset from the entire scenario. Even in this tabletop exercise, we emphasize this concept because it reinforces proper resource management. If crews are not rotated, performance declines and mistakes increase. This will in turn make safety risks go up significantly. Finally, we have CISM support. In a real incident, after the immediate response phase, we would provide access to trained professionals who can help responders process what they experience. This includes peer support teams, structured debriefings, and counseling resources. While we cannot replicate that in a tabletop setting, we still incorporate the discussion to ensure participants understand that mental health support is a planned, intentional part of emergency response and not just an afterthought. What's important to understand is that responder mental health directly impacts operational effectiveness. If responders are overwhelmed, fatigued, or mentally compromised, it will affect decision-making, communication, and overall safety. So as the incident commander, I treat mental health as part of the operational plan, not separate from it. Even in this exercise, we are reinforcing that principle, because in a real-world scenario, taking care of your people is just as important as managing the incident itself. Moving on to safety and security. At any aircraft incident, especially one involving fire, injuries, and a large number of responders, maintaining control of the scene is absolutely essential. As the incident commander at Columbus Airport, my priority is not only managing the emergency itself, but ensuring that responders, passengers, and the public remain safe throughout the operation. Looking at the slide, there are 4 key elements: PPE requirements, hazard zones, perimeter control, and crowd management. Starting with PPE, or personal protective equipment. All responders operating on or near the crash site are required to wear appropriate PPE. This includes fire-resistant gear for ARF personnel, high-visibility vests for operations staff, gloves, helmets, and eye protection, also if needed. Even in this tabletop exercise, we emphasize PPE because it directly impacts responder safety. Without proper protection, responders become victims, which only escalates the situation further. Next, hazard zones. As incident commander, one of my first actions after establishing the ICP is to ensure that hazard zones are clearly identified and enforced. We will establish a hot zone, which includes the immediate crash site and any active fire or fuel hazards. Next, a warm zone, where support operations such as triage, and staging occur. After that is the cold zone, which is considered safe for command, media briefings, and support personnel. By clearly defining these zones, we prevent unnecessary exposure to hazards and maintain organization across the response. Moving on to perimeter control. This is primarily handled by the Columbus Police Department. Their responsibilities include securing access points to the airfield, preventing unauthorized personnel from entering the scene, and managing traffic flow around the airport. This is critical because an uncontrolled scene can quickly become dangerous and chaotic, especially with media, families, and bystanders attempting to get closer to the incident. Finally, crowd management. As the incident progresses, particularly around the 30 to 40-minute mark when families begin arriving, managing people becomes just as important as managing the incident itself. We anticipate concerned family members arriving at the terminal, media presence increasing rapidly, and airport passengers becoming confused or anxious. To address this, we direct families to the Family Assistance Center inside the terminal, use airport staff and ambassadors to guide passengers, and coordinate with law enforcement to maintain order. This ensures that operations at the crash site are not disrupted and that people are handled safely and respectfully. What ties all this together is control. Safety and security are about maintaining control of the environment, the people, and the risks. As incident commander, I am constantly evaluating, are responders operating safely? Is the scene secure? Are we preventing additional hazards? Even in this tabletop exercise, we treat these elements as if they were real, because failure in any one of these areas can quickly turn an emergency into something much worse. Ultimately, a well-managed scene is a safe scene, and that is what allows us to carry out the rest of the response effectively. Now I want to talk about victim assistance, which is one of the most important responsibilities during this incident. As the incident commander at Columbus Airport, my focus is not only on managing the emergency, but also ensuring that passengers and their families are properly cared for. For this scenario, we established a Family Assistance Center inside the airport terminal, specifically in the designated family area shown on this slide. This location is chosen because it is easily accessible, separate from the main incident scene, and suitable for control, communication, and support. Once established, this area becomes a central point for passenger accountability. The airline works closely with airport personnel to verify the passenger manifest, confirm who has been accounted for, and identify anyone who may still require assistance. At the same time, we provide medical and counseling support. This includes coordinating with EMS for any injured individuals and bringing in support vehicles, such as the American Red Cross, to assist with emotional and psychological needs. What's important here is control and organization. We want to make sure families receive accurate information in a calm and structured environment, rather than at the scene of the incident. For this exercise, we emphasize that victim assistance is not an afterthought. It is a core part of the response and directly impacts how well the incident is managed overall. Moving on to ADA compliance. This starts with accessible evacuation. During the initial aircraft evacuation, we must ensure that passengers with limited mobility or other disabilities receive immediate assistance from crew members and responders. This may require additional time and coordination, but it is essential for safety. Once passengers are off the aircraft, we provide mobility support, including wheelchairs and assistant teams, to help move individuals safely from the crash site to medical areas or the terminal. We also assure effective communication through interpreters and accessible alerts. This will be sign language interpreters when needed, clear visual announcements, and audio messaging for those with visual impairments. The goal is to make sure that every passenger receives the same level of information and care, regardless of their needs. Even for a tabletop exercise, ADA compliance is fully integrated into the response plan. It's not treated as a separate task, but as part of overall operations. because at the end of the day, a successful response means that every single passenger is accounted for, supported, and safely assisted without exception. Next, I want to highlight the key stakeholders involved in this response, because managing an incident like this requires coordination far beyond just airport personnel. Starting with internal stakeholders, we have airport staff, TSA, and the Columbus Airport Commission, which serves as the operating authority. These groups are responsible for maintaining airport operations, security, and overall coordination during the incident. Externally, we expand to a much broader network. This includes city officials who support emergency management decisions, as well as local tenants such as general aviation operators who are affected by airfield closures and operational disruptions. We also have military involvement from personnel at Fort Moore, who can provide additional support if needed, particularly in terms of manpower and logistical capabilities. In addition, regional business partners may be impacted, especially those operating within or around the airport, so communication with them is important to maintain continuity and awareness. Finally, federal agencies like the FAA and the NTSB play key roles. The FAA supports regulatory oversight and operational coordination, while the NTSB is responsible for investigating the incident once the situation is stabilized. What's important here is that each stakeholder has a different role, but all of them need to stay aligned. My job is to make sure information flows clearly between these groups so that decisions are consistent and the response remains coordinated. That brings us on to the mutual aid. The first layer of support comes from local emergency services. Columbus Fire and EMS responds alongside Airport ARF, bringing additional firefighting capability and medical support. At the same time, the Columbus Police Department and the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office handle security, traffic control, and access to the airfield. Medical support is expanded through several local hospitals, including Piedmont Columbus Regional, St. Francis Emory Healthcare, and Jack Houston Memorial Hospital. These facilities receive and treat injured passengers, so coordination with them is critical early in the response. We also have support from Fort Benning, which can provide additional personnel and logistical resources if needed, especially in a larger scale situation. Next, we have Columbus State University, which is another valuable partner as it can assist with facilities, sheltering, or additional support functions depending on the needs of the incident. At the federal level, agencies like the FAA, TSA, and NTSB become involved. The FAA supports operational oversight, TSA maintains security requirements, and the NTSB takes over once the investigation phase begins. We also coordinate with state agencies, particularly through Georgia Emergency Management, for additional resources and support. Finally, the American Red Cross. They play a key role in supporting passengers and families, especially through the Family Assistance Center. What ties all of this together is coordination. These agencies don't operate independently. They're integrated through the ICS structure, which ensures everyone understands the role and works towards the same objectives. Without this network of mutual aid, managing an incident of this scale would not be possible. Now, let's move on to the communication, because this is what holds the entire response together. In an incident like this, things are moving quickly. Multiple agencies are involved, and decisions are being made in real time. Without a clear communication plan, coordination breaks down almost immediately. Starting with internal communication. Our primary method is radio communication. This allows direct, real-time coordination between ARF, airport operations, law enforcement, and all responding units. It's fast, reliable, and keeps everyone on the same page during critical moments. As a backup, we use cell phones and secondary communication systems. This becomes especially important if radio channels become overloaded, or, as we see in the scenario, if there are disruptions like the partial power outage. On the external side, communication is controlled through the Public Information Officer, or PIO. The PIO is responsible for all messaging to the public and the media. This ensures that information is consistent, accurate, and released in a controlled manner. One of the biggest challenges in this scenario is misinformation. As we saw in the timeline, false reports of fatalities begin circulating on social media. That can create panic and interfere with operations. So, part of the communication plan is not just sharing information, but actively correcting inaccurate information quickly and clearly. For my role as incident commander, I rely on structured communication flows. Information comes in from the field, is verified, and then pushed out through the appropriate channels. At the end of the day, communication is what keeps everyone aligned, internally with responders and externally with the public. If communication is clear and controlled, the entire response runs more effectively. Once the exercise is finished, we're going to have a hot wash, which is a critical step immediately following the exercise. A hot wash is essentially an immediate debrief that takes place while everything is still fresh. All participating agencies come together to discuss how the response went from their perspective. The goal here is not to assign blame, but to have an open discussion about what worked well and what didn't. We focus on identifying strengths such as effective communication. At the same time, we also look at gaps, areas where there may have been confusion, delays, or breakdowns in coordination. These are just as important because they highlight where improvements are needed. As the incident commander, I use this feedback to get a clear picture of how the operation actually functioned, not just how it was planned. Then, this information then feeds directly into the after action report, where we develop specific corrective actions. Even though this is a tabletop exercise, the hot wash is treated seriously because it's one of the most valuable learning tools we have. It's what allows us to take the scenario and turn it into real improvements for future incidents. Building on the hot wash, the next step is the after action report, which is where we take everything we discussed and formalize it into a structured evaluation. The after action report is focused on three main areas: performance evaluation, identifying improvements, and corrective actions. First, we look at overall performance. This includes how effectively the incident was managed, how well agencies coordinated, and whether objectives like response time, communication, and passenger care were met. From there, we identify areas that need improvement. These might include delays in communication, challenges with resource coordination, or gaps in procedures that become apparent during the exercise. The key here is being honest and specific. The goal isn't to make the report look good, it's to make the response better. Finally, we develop corrective actions. These are concrete steps that can be taken to address the issues identified. That could include updating procedures, improving training, or strengthening coordination with partner agencies. For this, I take what we learn and turn it into actionable changes. This ensures that the next time we face a real incident, we are more prepared and more effective. So, while the response itself is important, the after action report is what drives long term improvement. It's how we take this exercise and turn it into real world readiness. To wrap everything up, this tabletop exercise, how quickly a routine flight into Columbus Airport can turn into a complex, multi-layered emergency. What starts as a single aircraft incident quickly escalates into a situation involving fire, infrastructure issues, public concern, and coordinated response across multiple agencies. Throughout this exercise, the key takeaway is the importance of structure and coordination. Using ICS allows us to stay organized, assign clear roles, and make effective decisions under pressure. The activation of the EOC provides the support needed to manage resources and communication beyond the immediate scene. We also see how critical it is to balance operational response with passenger care, ensuring that victim assistance, ADA compliance, and family support are fully integrated into the plan. At the same time, strong communication, both internally and externally, is what keeps the entire response aligned and prevents confusion. And finally, the hot wash and after action report ensure that we don't just complete the exercise, we learn from it and improve for the future. At the end of the day, this exercise reinforces one key idea: preparedness. coordination, and leadership are what make the difference between a controlled response and a chaotic one. Thank you.